So my name is Jeff Stevenson with GPSL. I lead our sales and pre-sales team here. Just a little about myself. I've been with GPSL for it's about 10 years now, with various roles, most of them being technical in nature. Spent a long time with our services team. Before coming to GPSL, I was actually a customer. So I think many of you on the line are going to be customers or perhaps potential customers. So I've sat on your side of the table or on your side of the screen, as it were. So we're just going to go through a couple slides to introduce GPSL. And then, see if I can get this to go. There we go. And then we'll get into a presentation. So first thing about GPSL, so we have been around since about 2006. We have companies across the globe, and we operate in multiple industries. And today we're going to be talking about a technology that's predominantly used in the aerospace and defense industry, although it could be adapted to any application. Our history is a lot in dynamic and automated publishing. Our roots come with a company called Advent, which had at the time developed and brought to market a product called 3B2, which now with PTC is called Arbortext Layout Developer. In 2006, we became a services company, and we've been a partner of PTC ever since. We've expanded from the pure publishing into content management, working with Windchill, and then also working in aerospace and defense. But we still work in the other industries that you see here. GPSL has a very can-do attitude. We like to take on the challenging things and kind of the hard projects, and like to pride ourselves in seeing if the software can do what it wasn't perhaps imagined to do. So we find that challenging, and so it gets us up in the morning. So this is just an overview slide of the value chain, or what you may refer to as the digital thread. If any of you have been on a PTC webinar in the past or any sort of a PTC presentation, you may have seen a version of this slide. This is just a GPSL flavor of this. And what you can see here are three different categories, one being the create, manage, and the deliver. Create being where you obviously make content. It's all the applications and tools we use to make XML and the illustrations. Manage would be the Windchill piece where things are stored and content managed as far as versioning and life cycles and change management and all of that good stuff. On the deliver side, you can see there's a lot going on there, because you can get your content to your clients and to your audience in multiple ways, and there's a lot of options there. So today we're going to be talking in particular about S1000D, and you can see that there on this portion of the slide. So GPSL produced a module on top of PTC Windchill called S1000D, and S1000D is an XML specification, and we'll get more into this during the demonstration, but it was developed specifically for aerospace and defense, and it is a very complete XML specification. And I don't want to give away too much, because this is going to be coming up, but it is a module that was made to support S1000D inside of Windchill using the underlying software, and it all seemed to be a pretty good fit. So that'll be the focus of today, and we'll kind of touch on each of these buckets regarding S1000D and how it works inside of the PTC suite of products. And then we'll focus a little bit on GPSL Viewpoint, which is our item. If you aren't familiar with what an item is, it is an online viewer for S1000D content or any MIL standard or XML content that you may have. And with that, I will jump into the demo before I keep on saying too much. So let's see if I pick the right options here. There we go. And we'll go ahead and play. So we pre-recorded this because people working from home and bandwidth and everything like that. So safer to kind of have these things pre-done, but we are available for any questions you may have at the end. Today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about S1000D for PTC Windchill. It is a module that GPSL provides, mostly to the aerospace and defense industry, but it can be used in other industries as well. If you're not familiar with S1000D, S1000D is an XML specification, but it's a bit more than that. XML is typically just about the tagging and the S1000D schemas. S1000D takes that a few steps further. It certainly talks about the XML and the S1000D schemas, but it also talks a bit more about how the content is created. It defines the workflows, it defines the storage, it defines the authoring processes, and even the delivery processes for PDF and item. So I'm going to explain a little bit about this to you today. So first I'll start with the storage and how S1000D defines how things should be stored inside of a content management system. So in regards to S1000D and a CMS, you may refer to as a CSDB. That's called a common source database. That's really just the same name as saying anything that is storing S1000D per the S1000D specification. So using Windchill, we're able to use what's called an information structure, which is an attribute of Windchill itself. And we're able to repurpose this to support the SNS, or the standard numbering system. Now, if you look over on the left side here, you'll see what looks like a fairly cryptic hierarchy of nodes and things inside of this information structure. What this really is the definition of the SNS for this particular content. And you can see I've already drilled down to a data module, and a data module is just a term for a piece of XML content. And you can see inside this data module that the data module code is also the name, which makes up the pathway that you take to get from the top level tree of the SNS down to the content itself. So each of these sections also means something. So for those who are familiar with S1000D would be able to take a look at this data module code, and they could kind of trace through and understand exactly what this piece of content is. It's a very easy way to store XML, especially if you're dealing with hundreds or even thousands of XML fragments, depending on the equipment that you're supporting. And that you can look at a data module code rather than having to have descriptive file names or having to worry about duplication of file names. You can refer to this code. You can know what this data module is meant to describe and what it's meant to do. So what does a data module itself look like? Well, I have it open here. And inside of Windchill, there's what's called an information page. The information page is just a page that is about any object or any piece of XML inside of Windchill. And it's no different for S1000D. So if you look on the details tab, you can see I have a little bit of information here that tells me about this particular data module. And you can see it tells me the data module code, the issue date number, tells me its status, if it's checked in or checked out. It also tells me where it is in the life cycle for this particular piece of XML. If I go to the structure tab, you can see it tells me a little bit more information. It tells me what other XML fragments or data modules or graphics might be used by this particular piece of XML. And it's a great way to understand the linkage in between your content. You can see where things are used at a quick glance. This particular data module is only using one graphic. So if I go to the information page for that graphic, you see it looks very much the same, even though this is a graphic file and it's not a piece of XML. I still have the same information page. You can see here I have an inverse relationship to what I had on the XML page, in that I can see where this is used. So this is the graphic itself, and I can see it's used in this particular data module. This graphic was used in multiple data modules. It would list those data modules all here in this where used table. It also conveniently gives me a line art graphic or a thumbnail representation of what this graphic is, so I can see just as a quick view what this graphic is. So if I want to make changes to this graphic, this needs to be assigned to me. It needs to go through the S1000D workflow, which is prescriptive from the specification. I also need to be assigned to this particular data module code as the author. Only the author is able to make changes to this data module. And the same for the rest of the team. And I'll just take a quick glance at the team I have configured for this particular product. So on this particular product, the same user that I'm signed in as, which happens to be Christina, is assigned to every role. But you can see here the different roles that are must-have per the out-of-the-box workflows for S1000D for Windchill. And you can see that the author who's able to make changes. For those who are dealing with the illustrations, it would be the illustrator role. And then there's a product manager, a publications manager, and the reviewers are the ones who review the content that are coming from the authors and the illustrators. Reviewers are able to review content and even in some cases able to make suggested changes that would go back to the author to be finalized. It would cycle through that process until the changes to the data module were fully verified, in which case they would pass to the issued state for that data module code. Also within Windchill, there are several contexts. So I'm able to have different sets of data within the same instance of Windchill. And those can be separated by an organization, but more classically by a product. So you can see here with the access level I have access to 3 products on this instance of Windchill. And we've named these such that you can see that Windchill can support multiple issues of the S1000D specification. So this data set NPV is issue 4.1. We have some data in here for issue 4.2 and even going back to issue 3.0. The GPSL product for S1000D for Windchill supports back to issue 2.3 of S1000D. So now I'm going to go over to Arbor Text Editor. And if you see here, I just have a blank screen at the moment. But when this is configured and when this is connected to a CSDB or a Windchill instance that's supporting S1000D, I do have some extra menus here, particularly the S1000D menu. And if I click on my tasks, and when this opens up, you can see I have what's essentially a search dialog box that allows me to look through data modules from inside of Arbor Text Editor. Now, if you aren't familiar with Arbor Text Editor, it is a desktop XML authoring tool that is XML aware. So it guides the author through the process of authoring in XML, in any XML specification, including S1000D, and it doesn't allow anyone to go outside of the rules of whatever XML spec you might be working with. S1000D, again, because the workflows are prescriptive and they do get defined by the specification, we're able to recreate some of this functionality right within the authoring environment. So I'm an author and I know just based on the environment that I'm in, I have some tasks assigned to me. So I can do a search and I can use any of these criteria to filter my search down. But I'm just going to do an open search for right now. And after doing the open searching, so I just have 2 tasks assigned to me at the moment. But if I had multiple tasks assigned to me, even up to hundreds of tasks possibly, I could filter these out depending on the ones that I wanted to work on for today. So if I wanted to do work on one of these tasks, I would just select the one that I'm interested in, and I can either complete the task here. If my work was complete, I can view it or I can edit it. The difference between these 2 things is if I view, it simply opens up the data module inside of Arbor Text Editor. If I edit it, it opens up the data module and also checks it out from the CSDB. So the file is then locked to myself and no one else is able to make changes but me in that case. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to view it for right now. And you can see it opens up the data module and I can see there is some styling applied to this. And this is just for ease of use for the author so that they can see the difference between headings and links and bolds and italics and those kinds of attributes. If I close this out, I'm going to open up my other data module I had in my list. I'll just view this as well. You can see here that same styling is applied to this data module too. So it's consistent across the entire specification as far as the experience. that the author has, and it doesn't differ depending on that data module. Now, it certainly can, it's something that Arbortext can support, but for simplicity's sake, for S1000D and most implementations we want to have the same experience for every author throughout the XML specification. You can also see here the graphic that I had pulled in that I had showed inside of Windchill is also displayed here. So I can see this graphic, I can have a visual representation of what this is. I can confirm that I have the right graphic pulled in. You can also see here that there are several hotspots that are defined on this graphic. Those become important as we look at this inside of the item, but just wanting to point those out here that they are defined within the XML. Then when this gets exported out for published into the item, it carries that data over. So within the authoring experience, again, it doesn't allow me to go outside the specification, but S1000D also applies something called business rules, and the business rules are enforced by something called a Brex file. And as the author, I'm able to go into the S1000D menu, and I have several options in here. I can create an ICN, I can validate my entities, or I can do a Brex validate. So if I just hit Brex validate on this, it'll run a check, and it'll tell me that my document in this case is valid. If I had done something that was outside the business rules, say I used the wrong type of a word, if I had a non-standard header, or if I was using the wrong brand name, there's all kinds of things that this could be. It would flag those things here. So it's a bit of a check that's outside of just normal XML validation. It really is more about the data and making sure the data follows the business rules of the organization that is authoring this XML content. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. I'm going to go back into Windchill. So in addition to the authoring and publishing process, we can also create publications and deliver content per the S1000D specification. So in S1000D, publications are referred to as publication modules. And in Windchill, these are called publication structures. And these allow you to build your publications right from within the content management system. This is helpful because you don't need to go to a separate system or even into Arbortext to search and pull data into a publication. Then you're also able to publish from the publication structure. The publication structure with S1000D adheres to the publication module rules that are defined by the S1000D specification. You can see here, even the publication module has its own data module code. This is also included in the information structure or in the SNS. So I could find this here inside of Windchill. If I go to publication structures, or I could go to the information structure inside of the SNS, and I can see there are publication modules here as well. So there's Windchill, there are multiple ways to do almost everything, and it just depends on the author and the user who signed in and what their particular preference is. So once inside of the publication module, you can see that the naming here is not as cryptic as the SNS, and it really is meant for publication of a book or for a manual. And these can be separated out in any way. It really depends on the nature of the content. So if I drill down, you can see I have some data module codes here. And I can also drill down to an Illustrated Parts catalog, which would just be a collection of data modules that would show the graphics and the illustrations. If I wanted to publish this particular publication module, I would go to this dialog box here, and per my publishing rules, I can see different options. And these will change, and they can be different depending on what your delivery requirements are. In this case, I have two set for a PDF for different sizes for A4 and for 8.5 by 11. I also have one here set for the item to publish to Viewpoint, which would basically take all the XML in this publication module and bundle it together and export it out to go to an item. Again, this can be configured for other items. It can be Viewpoint. It can be the item that your organization uses. As long as the item is aware of S1000D, it will accept this S1000D. Everything has already been validated through the Brex. Everything has been checked as far as the XML validity as well. And through the workflows, everything is approved. So in the ideal world, once this is published out, it's all valid and true, S1000D, and then the item is able to ingest that and present it in an online view. So with that, I will pause and I will turn this over to Christina to show how this looks inside of Viewpoint.
Thanks, Jeff. Hi, I'm Christina, a solutions architect with GPSL, and I'm going to be introducing Viewpoint. Viewpoint is our ietp or item viewer, and I'm going to use it to show some of the S1000D data that Jeff was walking through earlier in the webinar. So when I get to Viewpoint, the first thing I'm going to do is log in to access the books that are in my library and also to access the bookmarks or sessions that may be associated to my username. Once I log in, the first thing I see is my library, which has all of my publications in it. You can see the majority of my publications are items, but I do have one PDF because Viewpoint supports multiple formats. So from here, I can launch any of these publications, or I can search the entire library. I can start with a basic text search, or I can switch over to something more advanced if I wanted to refine my search. I'm going to go ahead and keep it basic and just search on the word wheel in all of the publications. So the results that appear are going to be the instance of the word wheel, and it's going to cite the publication as well as the specific DM where it appears. When I hover over the result, it's going to give me an applicability tooltip telling me what the applicability for that result is. And I can launch it either in the ID&S view or in the full view, which opens the entire item. And when I open the result, it's going to go ahead and highlight wheel throughout. From the main page, I also have access to my bookmarks. If I wanted to mark my place and come back to it at a later time, I can go ahead and launch it from right here. So I'm going to open up the publication that we were looking at in Windchill earlier. When the item launches, it's your basic publication view with the table of contents on the left and the content pane on the right. The table of contents will look familiar right now from the publication structure or pub module that we saw earlier in Windchill. However, you can toggle between a couple of different options in Viewpoint, and these are configurable as you're building that publication and publishing it into Viewpoint. So we can switch to a system drill down, we can look at the illustrated parts, and we can toggle back to the original author. So if I look in my maintenance manual, so if I hover over a data module in the table of contents, I get this tooltip, which gives me the full title, the number, as well as the applicability. And I can see on this one, as well as this one down here, they're both marked with dual grip applicability. If I wanted to filter my applicability, that is done from this menu down at the bottom. Now, applicability is applied to the entire book. So even if I was looking in an individual DM, my selections in this menu are applied to the entire publication. So if I switched to a single grip, that would update my entire publication. And when I go to the same place, I can see that those data modules are no longer present. If I go ahead and clear that applicability again, or switch to a dual grip, we can see that both data modules are back in the table of contents because they match the applicability I have filtered to. So let's look at one of the data modules we saw a little bit earlier in Windchill. So looking at a procedural module in Viewpoint, your references at the top are going to be links to other data modules. You can go ahead and click that. It'll launch me to the other data module so I can see the content. As I scroll down, every time you see a part number in Viewpoint, it has this little search. So if I click the search, it's going to automatically perform a part number search on that part number and give me all of the instances where this part number appears in the publication. In this case, it only appears in this one data module, but if it appeared in multiple locations, I would have multiple results. Scroll down, we have warnings, cautions. If I found a tool in my procedure, I can hover over it to get a tooltip with some part information, but if I go ahead and click the link, it'll jump me up to the table where the tool appears. And then if I have a figure in my data module, I can open the media pane. The media pane offers some basic tools for manipulation. I can zoom. I can toggle the background. If there were hotspots, I could enable those. We can get into those a little bit more with the IPDs. If I wanted to really zoom, maybe get some perspective on where I was in the context of the image. Now, if I wanted to then print this data module, there is a print option. Now, this print is leveraging the browser print engine. So this is not running against an S1000D style sheet. Instead, it's just taking what you see on the screen and running it against your browser print engine. So if you had like a device connected to your computer, that would appear as an option here. So as you're working through Viewpoint, it is logging your movements, and you have the ability to save your sessions. So if I come back to the library and I look in my sessions, I can see that I have sessions that I have saved. There's even one that the system has saved for me. So if I wanted to save my session and either pass it to another user or come back and resume it, I can do that. So let me go ahead and restore this session. This session is a fault isolation procedure, which allows us to actually walk through and take action on the steps. These actions are then logged in the background. So I can go ahead and click through on the next step, and then I can make my selection. This selection is going to alter my path through the data module. As you can see, each selection takes me to a different following step. If I needed to then go to the cross-reference, I can click that and it will bring me, and I can go ahead and walk through this child data module. And when I've completed that, I'm returned to my original one. If I wanted to check my progress, it would show the parent data module and then additionally everything I've done in the child data module. Now at any point, if I wanted to go back, I could. Also, if I wanted to go ahead and suspend my session, I could do that again as well. Then it will again appear in my session manager. Coming back to our original data set, let's transition to the IPD. When we're looking at the IPD, we can see that this one has hotspots enabled. So as we click through the hotspots on the graphic, they're also highlighted in the table. That can be done also from the table side. then all of the same tools that we saw in the media pane in the data module are also available here. Additionally, we have these annotation tools. If we wanted to add text, or if we wanted to draw, these could then be hidden or shown or removed. And then if you had annotations on the graphic, you would be able to then print it with those annotations on it. So as you can see, this is the same graphic we had earlier in Windchill, which has now made it all the way out to our viewer, and it can be consumed by people in the field. So this has been our S1000D data in Windchill all the way out to the viewer, and a basic tour through Viewpoint.
Okay, let's jump back into the PowerPoint for a second, and then we'll take some questions. Just to summarize everything that we showed there. So that was really just a touch on a few different features and things as far as S1000D and Windchill, and then how that same content would be viewed inside of in an item, in this case, in Viewpoint. So you probably saw some of the geometry in there and some of the graphics that we showed, and they were the same graphics between Windchill and Viewpoint. And that was on purpose, just to show that those things do carry over. Now, what we didn't show, it just for sake of time, is that geometry can be derived from upstream engineering content, and it can come from CAD files and things. And that can be rendered into illustrations meant for the server side, meant for technical publications. So that's really the benefit you get of doing this inside of Windchill, which is also a PLM system, in that you can either handle your engineering content within Windchill, or that engineering content can be pulled into with Windchill and then can be leveraged downstream for your technical publications, and that can be delivered out to an item, to a PDF, or some other output. And that's really what we refer to as the digital thread when we say that term, is that all of your content can start in one place and flow down and out to your customers. It can all go through the same change management process, and it doesn't have a lot of manual intervention. There isn't copy paste. There isn't having to download files and move files around. It can all be within one system. That really ensures your data integrity as far as what your subject matter experts are putting in to your content is what's getting out to your customers. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, we do have a few questions. First question is issue 4.2 and 5.0 supported? So
in PTC Windchill, we support S1000D issues 2.2, 3.0, 4.0, 4.1, 4.2, and 5.0. Sorry, that was probably more than what they had asked for. But we do support a lot in the PTC Windchill at this time. Viewpoint supports the same versions, but we're not quite at 5.0 yet. That's going to be coming out, I believe, sometime mid-time next year.
Okay, now the question, can you talk a bit more about the offline ietp feature? How does it sync? Is it compatible with tablet devices?
I will pass it over to Christina.
So the offline viewer is done on the browser can be deployed offline. So if it's on a tablet, it is just viewed on the tablet's browser. As far as a sync, it would be a package that is delivered, and then the package is just updated whenever they have connectivity.
Okay, now the question, any features in the ietm to support wire trace?
Yes, there is a enhanced graphic support where there are additional tools in the media pane that are enabled based on the type of graphic, and those do include some wire trace tools.
Okay, great. Next question. How does the engineering or this CATIA, C-A-T-I-A files will be loaded into Windchill?
So CATIA files loaded into Windchill. Yes, that's more of a PLM question, but Windchill is able to support multiple CAD applications. So whether you use Creo or CATIA or some other application to develop your CAD, Windchill is open and it allows for that integration. So you can use your CAD application of choice and still check things in and out of Windchill and use Windchill as your PLM system. And that same geometry, whether it comes from, it's independent of what CAD application it came from, it can still be leveraged downstream to create illustrations in your technical content.
Another question, would we need to change anything at the Windchill side to adopt Viewpoint?
No, they're meant to work together. So what you're doing inside of Windchill as far as S1000D, it really is dependent more upon S1000D than on the applications. So the applications are configured and made to where they support the specification, not the other way around. So if you're working with S1000D inside of Windchill and your item, whether it's Viewpoint or something else, also supports S1000D, that should be agreeable across the application. So there's nothing you need to change in Windchill to make it work with Viewpoint or some other S1000D, viewer application. Now, if you go outside the specification and you're doing some things that I would call non-standard to S1000D, that's a different story. That's more making the application work towards your spec than the two applications working together to show your content.
Okay, another question. Does the tool support tech manual creations for ATA iSpec 2200 standard?
Not today, it doesn't, no. So ATA is a different specification than S1000D. So we don't have an out-of-the-box product that supports ATA at this time. However, Windchill is it's a framework, it's a toolbox. So it can be made to support any XML specification that you need to use. So just like it's been adapted or configured to work with S1000D, the same thing can be done with ATA. It can be done with a mill standard. It can be done with kind of a homegrown proprietary type of XML spec. And we have a lot of experience with doing that as well at GPSL. With ATA, I'm not an ATA expert, but I know it's very similar to S1000D. So a lot of the same concepts that we showed with S1000D and Windchill could be applied and adapted to ATA.
And the question, if we are creating ietp files, how does our customer view them as they are a separate entity with their own secure domains?
Yes. Do you want to take it, Christina, or do you want me to take a stab at that one?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So if I understand the question correctly, so if you're a manufacturer and you're hosting an ietp and you want external people to be able to access that, that's certainly possible. And it's a pretty common architecture to be able to do that type of a thing. Really, it comes down to where are the distribution servers for the ietp. Those have to be, obviously in a place on that company's network where external people can access that. And then through whatever access control that comes from, that organization's particular IT governance would need to be in place. So it's not really an issue with the ietp. It really is around what is the networking security, parameters like for that particular organization as far as allowing external players in to see that content.
Great, one more question. Will GPSL's S1000D module work with Teamcenter Unified?
That's sort of a big question. So I'm not as familiar with Teamcenter, but if the question is around, can it take Teamcenter content as far as engineering and pull that in? It certainly can. It's really a question between Teamcenter and Windchill. They're similar applications that they're both the PLM applications, so they can handle a lot of the same content. So because Windchill is you know, it has a similar feature function to Team Center, it can store that same type of content that Team Center has natively. Once you get that content into Windchill, it doesn't need to be managed in Windchill, but just needs enough of the content, even as a copy or a read-only duplicate, that then can be carried down through the digital thread of Windchill, and it can be leveraged with S1000D or with any portion of the server side of Windchill.
Okay, and can the ietp viewer be hosted in a cloud environment?
Yes.
Great. I don't see any more questions at the moment. So if there's no more questions, oh, looks like another one just came in. Is Viewpoint tied to Windchill S1000D, or is it a separate product to build publications?
So Viewpoint is just a viewer. So if you want to, so it's not going to create new content for you. It's not a content management system, or it's not a content creation system. It's just for viewing content. And if you recall back to what Christina showed with, as far as how you kind of work through sessions and walk through a procedure, it really is meant for those who are going to be the consumers of the content. The interface and everything is tailored to that type of a use case. Content creation is going to be handled by a system purpose built for that, something like Windchill, right? Which is a content management system. It has authoring tools, you know, that are integrated to it. It has change management, all those kinds of things. So so Viewpoint isn't going to do all that. It's just going to present content that's already been created, managed, approved, and then imported into it for viewing and for consumption.
Yeah, a couple more questions came in. Would you make use of a process data module for ietp purpose or a publication module?
Publication module is what I would recommend, because that's really where you're organizing your content for viewing. You know, publication modules were classically created for manuals. In this case, we aren't talking about a manual. We aren't talking about a printed book. We're talking about a web application. But some of the same principles apply, is that you're organizing this for presentation to somebody who needs to, again, consume and view that content. And within the context of Windchill and how S1000D has been implemented there, the publication module working inside of a publication structure would be the way that I would go about that.
Okay, will GPSL will support in modifying DDT or style sheet as per requirement?
We will, yeah. I mean, we're a solutions company. You know, S1000D is very prescriptive, as I said sort of during the demonstration. So it's a very complete specification. It's not just XML. It deals with workflow and presentation and all the things that you can think of in that technical publication value chain. But no two companies are alike, and to say that everybody's going to be cookie cutter and just use S1000D the same way would be pretty short-sighted. And that wouldn't be very exciting for us either as a solutions company. So if people need to go outside of the specification, they need to make modifications to the DTDs or anything as far as S1000D, or modifications to the software to fit their business rules. It's something that we certainly do. It's part of the service side of our business. Now, I would caution somebody, though, if they do want to modify the S1000D DTDs, there would need to be a very good business rule for doing so. S1000D is meant to be a transferable and sort of a global specification. So if you do have to go outside of S1000D, there has to be, I would say, a very good use case for doing so, because you might be disqualifying yourself from sharing your content to other S1000D applications who might not be expecting those changes to the DTD. So it's something we can do, but we investigate that thoroughly before we allow our customers to really go down that route.
Okay, thanks. So we did get a couple more questions in, but we are out of time. So I will send a report to GPSL with all the questions that were asked and make sure that they got answered either during the presentation or offline. So thanks everyone for your time. We appreciate you attending. If you have additional questions, please send them to me, mwagner@ptc.com, and hope everyone has a great day. Thanks for joining.